Okay, so in this lesson, I'm going to talk about some ways to approach the 2/5 that you find in a jazz blues or a swing style blues. And if you want to check out a transcription of the solo that I just played, you can go to the link below or the link on screen to sign up for my newsletter and download a PDF that's got notation and tab for that exact solo, so you can look at it note for note and really check it out. In this lesson, I'm going to be talking about playing in the key of F, in this position that I think of as the Charlie Christian position. And there's a couple of other lessons that I did in this series where I sort of walk through this scale I'm using on the one chord and this position, and I'll put links to those down below as well, and at the end of the lesson. But right now we're going to focus on what happens when you get to the 2/5, which happens in bar 9. If you're in the key of F, you're going to be going along from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, back to the 1 chord, and then over to the 4, and then the 1, and then maybe to the 6 if you're playing in more of a jazz kind of blues as opposed to a swing kind of blues. But either way, you'd end up on G minor to C7, which is the 2 and then the 5. I guess you'd say those are the 2 and the 5 in the key of F. So G minor to C, 2, 5, taking you back to F. And what I have noticed a lot of musicians doing, I was taught when I was a not very good jazz student in school to play like literally through the 2 and the 5. And I could never get it to sound very good or very hip. I'm not saying the fact that I wasn't hip is anybody's fault, but mine had really good teachers, but I could never get it to sound like I wanted it to. But then much more recently, I was transcribing these Joe Pass and Oscar Peterson licks, and I noticed they both did this thing where, I don't know if they do this all the time or what, but I noticed them doing it, and I thought it was really cool, and it was very similar. They were both doing a very similar thing, so I guess it's a thing. What they do is they play the 2 chord, but then they don't play the 5, they just play a blues lick. And after a while I was like, well, how can they get away with that? And then I realized the bluesy part of it works over the 5 because it sets up this kind of tension, like playing the blues over the 5. It's got all these notes that are sort of wrong relative to the 5 chord. And it just, those blues licks, they want to resolve down to the root. They just do, and so that's a big part of why it sounds good. The other part is that what they're doing is they're taking the upper intervals of the 2 chord. So if they're in F, here's the root, G of the 2 chord. But they're often playing the flat 3rd, the 5th, the flat 7, and the 9, as opposed to root, flat 3, 5, flat 7. And it just seems to sound hipper. And so here are the chord tones, and then in between you can fill in scale steps, which you can think of as either filling in scale steps that come from the home key, F, or you can just think of it as scale steps that come from a G Dorian scale. But either way, you can also play just the chromatic notes just below each chord tone. There's a million things you can do, but the basic idea is you play a measure of G minor, and then play some F blues. And one of the other reasons that it works is there's a lot of overlap, because here's flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9 of G, but also look, this is the 6th and the root and the 3rd of F. So by the time you get here, well, are you playing G minor or are you playing F? Can't really tell. It's really the same thing. So everything's context. They overlap, they kind of dovetail. You've got G minor slowly becoming F blues, and it's so seamless you don't even really notice that it's happening. So a couple of licks. Here's a really simple one. So flat 3, 5, flat 7, and now we're into the blues. Or coming down. Descending, somehow the root seems to kind of work out a little better. And so I'm coming down flat 7, 5, flat 3, root, and then going up scale wise, and then flat 3 to 3, root, and then a really common swing thing, which is play major 7 on the 1 chord. And it sounds really bright and like, well, you're like, well, shouldn't it be flat 7? But actually, I think that the reason that it happens is because it sort of temporarily sounds like the 5 chord, like C. This is like root and third of C, resolving to F. But it's also just a sound. It sounds good. Like I've seen Duke Robillard give a workshop where he's like, well, you know, major 7 just... And he plays a bunch of licks that have that bright major sound. You're like, well, it sounds great when you do it, so I guess it's cool. So that's kind of where the 2-5 fits in the context. So if you're playing just something really simple, decide which of those 2-5s to play, so I ended up playing this weird thing in between that just sounded ridiculous. But that's the idea. That's where that fits. And if you go back and look at that first solo that I did and download that transcription, links below, links on screen, you can see it in context as well. So that's it for this lesson. Don't forget to scroll down and leave a comment or a question if you've got one. Download the notation, and I'll see you next time.